Hello everybody and welcome to one of our fine webinars. I hope I find you very, very well wherever you're watching us. If you're watching us on LinkedIn, if you're watching us through our YouTube presence or wherever you're engaging, we promise that we have the content for you. Now, Ian, good afternoon. How are you doing?
Good afternoon, Scott. Very well, thank you. Yourself?
Very, very well. I'm loving the on-brand background that we've both gone for. Kind of instills that kind of really nice focused professionalism that we all love. We do like to keep things light and engaging throughout everything that we say, but what isn't going to be light and engaging is what I'm about to do now, which is almost the This Is Your Life resume for Ian Watson. So Ian, if you'll just indulge me for 30 seconds, I'm really going to kind of set the scene for you as a person, if that's all right. And this is the bit where you potentially get a little bit embarrassed. So you have over 20 years experience in tech consultancy. You specialize in DevOps, Agile, and transformation. You describe yourself as a LinkedIn transformational technology leader and enthusiast of all things Agile, DevOps, SRE, and team topology. Are all those statements true, Ian?
If I said them, they must be true. Absolutely. I'll stand by them.
One thing that I absolutely find amazing about yourself is that everything that we can find on you is true, and any kind of guidance that you give is always very well received. So today's topic of webinar is going to be FinOps, and as somebody who isn't very well versed in the subject and wants to learn a heck of a lot about FinOps, I'm going to start off with one of those basic questions I can think of, and that question is, Ian, can you give me a very kind of big scale, very high level wrapper of FinOps as a subject, maybe some foundational principles, something like that?
Yeah, sure. So I guess the probably smallest, easiest way of describing it would be cloud cost management. I'll quote the actual FinOps Foundation because they should know, who say FinOps is an operational framework and cultural practice which maximizes the business value of cloud. It enables timely data-driven decision-making and creates financial accountability through collaboration between engineering, finance, and business teams.
Absolutely to the marker. And again, another thing I completely admire about you is if I ask for a wraparound statement of something, you give me a wraparound statement of something. So always well appreciated. Can you then give us just kind of a really quick overview of what our wonderful viewers are going to see over the next kind of 10-20 minutes as far as the knowledge that you're going to impart?
Yeah, sure. I'm just going to go through a bit of what is FinOps in more detail than I just did, hopefully, by way of a few real life stories of my learnings and experiences of actually putting some of these things into practice.
Ian, massively appreciated. Over to you.
Thank you very much indeed. Right. Okay. Okay, so what the FinOps? As we said, it's all about cloud cost management, but as always, there's a lot more to it than that. So I'm Ian, as you described, I'm head of delivery at Burendo, but yeah, I come from a very much engineering-y, platformy, DevOps-y, cloudy background. I've had various roles where I've been involved and responsible for sort of the spend in the cloud for organizations. So when I started thinking about this conversation and what is FinOps all about, so we all love public cloud. It has made agile software delivery much easier. Continuous delivery is now an order of magnitude more achievable than it was when we were building our own data centers, running things on tin. So as I was writing this, it got me thinking, what exactly is FinOps really all about? So I guess the knee-jerk reaction to that is it's all about money. But if that was the actual answer, this would be a much shorter talk. So maybe it's actually about the tools, I thought. Well, that's very much just the ops bit. Now, I suspect no one who's ever met me before is going to be surprised when I came to the conclusion that FinOps is really all about people. Well, people, their behavior, and the culture of the organization. So How did I come to this conclusion, I hear you ask? Well, I'm glad you asked. It all boils down to one very, very simple question. Who do you think controls the cloud spend? And who should care about it? So in the old world, it was much more straightforward for finance to sign a check to buy some servers. And that would be deprecated over 5 years. And everyone understood where the money had been spent and what they were getting for it. To help understand, I guess, a bit of the what and the why of FinOps and how that changes as we move to a public cloud compute, here is a little story based on true events from various companies. It's not just one. Right. I'll tell today is all about a company's cloud adoption. Now, I'm sure there are some companies out there who've had a carefully planned strategy about moving to the cloud. I'm sure a subset of these that it went roughly to their plan and they've adopted it safely and reliably and successfully. Honestly, I've never worked in any of those organizations. I think for many, that strategy goes as far as the CTO going, we should be leveraging the cloud. And then a few good people start doing many of the right things and start to, leverage servers on demand, SaaS services and things like that. Alternatively, the other pattern is the dreaded shadow IT, where no one has said, let's leverage the cloud, but some people have started using it before the company, the wider company is really aware there's end users now reliant on cloud offerings. For today's story, however, it's the former. So there was a CTO said we're going to leverage the cloud, and it started out with a small footprint managed by a single team. This was okay and fine and sustainable. All the while, it was small enough that the team could have a fair understanding of what was being used and how much was being spent on it. They understood why things were and could watch the monitoring carefully. This one team basically did all the things, and it did them all to a decent level of maturity. Great. Everyone was happy and shiny, like these happy, shiny people here. Right. It was very successful. Rapidly more and more sub-accounts were added, more teams were adopting the cloud, and even third parties were now working happily on the public cloud for our organization, delivering rapid change and innovation to delighted customers. There are definitely no downsides, I'm sure. So there are challenges, as I'm sure you were expecting. So first off, cognitive load. That's been something I've been thinking a lot about recently. Go and read team topologies if you want a much, much more in-depth discussion of the challenges caused by cognitive overload. But in short, as the cloud use rapidly scaled, the small team that was once able to keep its collective brain understanding all the moving parts, what wasn't running, what was running, why it was there, why it was using a certain technology, and what the costs were, very, very quickly runs out of brain space. There's no way of scaling the approach that we had quickly and sensibly, as the rate of cloud use often expands exponentially, So that's the first thing. The next thing, while operational requirements like uptime and performance were absolutely being focused on, this is good. There are still many organizations that don't see anything beyond functionals. However, cost wasn't being factored in so much. A lot of people were still used to working on pre-bought servers that sunk cost, deprecated over years. So there wasn't really a focus on that as operational requirements. In fact, the total cloud spend was now running at pretty much double what anyone had estimated initially, due to being a victim of its own success, and that was rapidly getting worse. To exacerbate things, and again, this is a very common pattern, the cloud budget sat with a central IT team. Now, while obviously most of the spend sat with the development teams, you can imagine the behaviours that this drove. So, old ways and new ways, and why change? When I first arrived and picked up de facto ownership of the cloud platform team, A lot of people said to me, you're here to save us money. But I don't think that that's the right way to think about why FinOps and why change how we do things. So where I started, it was simply impossible to make sound business decisions and really understand important metrics like return on investment. It would have been entirely possible that a software product was looking great and bringing in thousands and thousands of pounds a week, whilst unknowingly costing tens of thousands and thousands of pounds to run. Now, in this case, it wasn't that extreme, but honestly, it absolutely could have, and it would have been some months before anyone noticed. So for me, FinOps, whilst saving money is often one of the outcomes, it's more about spending responsibly and with awareness of where you're spending it and why. That awareness of how much we're spending and awareness of how we can spend it in the most efficient way possible. Okay, that very much plays to the lean concept of reducing waste. So how do we do this then? So what's putting FinOps into practice look like? Okay, so people, technology, and process. It's a bit of all three. Initially, well, what we know is culture change is hard for an organization. Yeah, it is literally probably the hardest thing you will ever try to do. And don't mistake that introducing this sort of FinOps approach is absolutely a cultural change. Finance, development, IT operations all need to start thinking in a different way from what works on premise with their own data centers. Tooling. So for all I said, it's all about people. Tools are great and important. What they are is great for is tweaking people's behaviors, and in turn, that leads to your change in culture. So visibility needs to be made easy and accessible. People already will rather not think about these sorts of things. There needs not to be an excuse, a plausible deniability why it's difficult to understand your spend. Now, the various cloud providers, whilst they do give you the tools to look at the costs and how much you're spending, they don't necessarily, because they have a vested interest, make it as easy as they could. So in this case, we did actually bring in a third-party tool, and it's definitely something I'd recommend, especially if you are using multiple cloud vendors. Again, getting everything in one place and visible together is super important. So very easily and very quickly, you can get visibility of usage, reservations. So all of the cloud providers, if you start to commit to spending a certain amount of money or using a certain amount of compute, will give you some very, very decent reductions in prices. Recommendations. So again, making it easy to very quickly see where I could save money or where I've spun up servers that are way bigger than I need them, or where they're never being used on a weekend, or that sort of thing. Francis Bacon allegedly said, knowledge is power. Don't know whether that's true or not. Okay, carrots and sticks. First things first, we make it visible, as I've said. Okay, even if we don't know who we're going to be showing it to, we made dashboards for each of the sub accounts, so that we had for each of the areas that someone at some point had decided should sit together, what the spend looked like and where it was going. We can worry about the owners later. Just getting it visible to ourselves as a cloud platform team, as that almost FinOpsy team, is the first step. The second step is then to find the owners. Now, the nice thing about cloud compute, it is incredibly traceable. So again, all of the providers will give you the logs about exactly who spun up what, where, and when. So by finding out who those people were and then understanding what teams they worked in and who their leaders were, we were able to go, right, we think this account should sit with that area. This led to some interesting first introductions to some of the directors at the organisation, which went along the lines of, hi, I'm Ian, pleased to meet you. Did you know you're £200,000 over budget in your cloud spend? It certainly makes one memorable, and it does certainly get some attention. So the other way of getting some attention and starting to encourage changes in behaviour were publishing league tables of spend. And literally for each area, we would make visible to all areas where a lot of the spend was. Because again, as a central IT team, we cannot have an understanding of what is running and why it's running in there. So that stops being your cloud platform team's responsibility. They are there to make sure everyone can see it. And that, plays to human nature. It's great if pointed in the right direction, and no one really wanted to be top of the spending all the money charts without having a very good reason why they were spending all the money, which prompts a need for understanding into why that money's been spent, which in turn starts to change the culture we're talking about. So collective understanding of simple ways to spend the money wisely. So this is, to date, so all the things I've talked about so far are almost each of the silos. That's the who's spending what, your responsibility, what you're spending. FinOps then tries to pull everyone together for a collective understanding of how to spend that money well. So again, most of the providers will give you big discounts, and you'll do that at the company level, not at the individual products level and individual spend level. So while we all get together and talk about how much we think we're going to spend up front, but also start to share ways of saving money or spending it in a more lean fashion. So there's that natural drive for people to sit in silos and optimize the area. But we know from the theory of constraints, which is a conversation for another day, that this is rarely the best approach. And indeed, generally, it works best at that organizational level. So we started these regular catch-ups with someone representing each area and simply running through the recommendations from the tooling. So initially, there were hundreds and hundreds of recommendations. We would start with just the top 10. Don't try and eat the whole elephant, as the agile saying goes. We'll just eat a little bit at a time. So to begin with, often this would lead to the budget holders scratching their heads and going back to their teams to ask questions of why we were spending so much in a certain area. Do we need those? Can we turn them off sometimes? And some of the conversations were, yes, we need them. They have to be there all the time. A lot of the conversations were, you're right, that probably could be smaller. That probably could be switched off at weekends, evenings, when it wasn't being used. So every month we aim to make more and more changes and reservations and any other appropriate actions to start to improve our collective performance. And also collectively, we started to understand what best practice looked like. Now, normally I avoid that phrase, best practice, because there really is best practice that applies to everyone everywhere. But for each company, yeah, there probably is a best practice. So I'm kind of comfortable using that there, and having knowledgeable partners as we were doing that and being able to talk to the likes of the cloud providers. They will happily bring experts in to support you, to talk to the tooling providers about their recommendations. Really helps as well, shortcut, because no one wants to relearn everything that's already been learned. So, new state. Eventually, everything was all sunshine and palm trees, and we were sat around drinking pina coladas as everything went smoothly. No, sorry, I mean, it's not quite how the story ends, unfortunately. But it was certainly considerably better than where we had started. For example, some real number examples here. In year one, we had saved $150,000 simply by committing to certain spend. So that's not changing how we did anything. That's not changing how we pay for it. It's not even paying anything up front. That's just saying to our cloud provider, we're definitely going to spend this much. When we work, we spend more. So that was, quite a reserved approach, but suddenly knocked 10% off the budgeted spend. Another scenario, we avoided spending $14,000 a month in storage that simply didn't seem to be attached to anything and people had forgotten about. So again, that visibility that no one saw or owned, just hanging around. So another massive plus that we found was the ability to learn quickly and react. So that was kind of the proactive stuff, getting ahead of it, tidying up our own detritus. Another certain project was stood up to do a migration from a data center into the cloud. After the first month, we collectively in our group meeting spotted that one of the development environments had cost nearly $70,000 for the month. So this was immediately obvious, because we saw a big spike on the lovely graph. We talked to the owner of the project, and did you know this is dev environment? You now have obviously other environments you're going to build in live. Do you have budget for that? Again, it's not about saying no. It's about making sure we know what we're getting in for here. However, on this occasion, the answer was no. And a decision was taken to rethink migrating that service, or at least the form of migrating it. So in that case, you saved instantly nearly $500,000 of spend that would have been discovered far too late in the day to actually change anything, and would have been sunk cost anyway by that point. So yes, being able to proactive, learn quickly and react is another massive thing. Another, on top of there are so many benefits. Being able to forecast realistically for the next year ahead was, again, a massive business benefit, whereas previously it had been very finger in the air, we think this, and as I said, was at least 50% too low. Because humans are hopelessly optimistic, always at estimating how long something will take or how much something will cost. Whereas again, if you have the right tooling, we've got the costs in there, we can literally draw a prediction line based on yesterday's spend that will start, well, it's increasing by 5% a month. So therefore, next year we'll spend this. So yes, it's all about spending responsibly and deliberately. So I'll pull out a few key learnings from all of that and summarize. First off, the power that visibility gives you is immense. Yeah. Ownership comes as a handy side effect, as there's no longer that plausible deniability. Active management is incredibly important. This is not a one and done. This isn't design it right, it'll be okay forever. Cloud native approaches have a lot of moving parts, and the cloud providers are constantly changing their offering. New instance types, new SaaS services that may just be doing the same thing, but in a more cost-effective way. And, you know, a few years ago, AWS, for example, completely changed how companies were able to make reservations. So taking advantage of those things as they happen is super important. You've got to stay on it, basically. So again, don't underestimate people here. As humans, we have a very, very large habit of doing the same thing we've always done. So while all the individual teams we're looking at, you still need someone dragging this forward, making sure those meetings are happening, making sure we're really talking about, is there stuff we can change? Can we do things better collectively? It's a great opportunity for cross-team collaboration. You know, as we all know, companies and humans, again, love silos and working there a little bit. So even when teams aren't working on anything like the same thing, they are collaborating, and that's always a benefit for the company. People get to know people, and that collaboration is also a great driver for a virtuous cycle of improvement. No one wants to look less mature than the other teams, and that is the end.
Ian, thank you so much. You've definitely lived up to the illustrious intro that I gave at the start, and I've taken away a couple of key points, and I'd love to just kind of share just some thoughts and some and kind of probe your mind a little bit further. You've been talking all the way there through the concept of FinOps as, you know, kind of been driven by a number of different factors, and the big piece I've taken away is that people matter. And I think potentially the name of the concept, or the way that it's branded, is now very, you know, counterintuitive. So, I mean, in your opinion, what's the biggest misconception about FinOps?
I think I said it a couple of times in there, actually, it's that people assume that it's a one and done cost saving exercise. But it isn't. It's about spending the right things for your company in the right way, basically.
When we're talking again about, you know, kind of people and principles, you kind of mentioned there a few times about practitioners, you know, that the people who kind of deliver this ideology and help those kind of large scale enterprise level plus organizations achieve this. So, you know, coming from the background that you have, what do you feel makes a a FinOps practitioner successful? You know, is there any kind of secret or key ingredients that they have to have?
I think the key thing is they need to be a good collaborator. So I think you can't do it in isolation. As I said right at the beginning, you've got the top technology teams, who are obviously the ones now spending the money. You know, again, in that old world, finance would write a check and know where it was going. In the new world, then your developer could press a button and spin up a £70,000 dev environment.
Yeah.
So yeah, being a good collaborator who can talk to engineers and finance and the business is really important, and get them all understanding why they all need to care about that cloud spend, and it isn't just an IT problem, which is a lot of the time how it gets pigeonholed, I think.
One thing I think that's come across very, very kind of openly there is the positives. And I mean, you know, we all like to be kind of totally transparent. We all like to be, you know, completely open book. And I'm guessing there then that, you know, on the flip side of that, you've possibly seen some negatives during your time in the field. So, you know, obviously I've asked the good question. I'm going to ask the bad question. So if we're thinking, you know, starting out deploying, what's the biggest kind of mistakes that a practitioner can make when first approaching, you know, the subject of FinOps with a client? Is there any, like, you know, big red herrings or flashing lights that seem to happen again and again?
I think the most common anti-pattern is IT thinking it can do it by itself as a silo, and putting controls around the spend and putting red tape in place, putting large amounts of governance and process, and doing it that way. Because you lose so much of the benefit you get from sort of the agility of being able to use cloud compute and do things quickly and fast. So yeah, I think it's that really. It has to be done collectively, getting everyone buying in and doing the right things for the right reasons.
And in pure kind of, you know, Columbo style, there's a reference that some people hope we'll get. Just one more question on this. So you've really emphasized there throughout that kind of focused presentation on people, practicing. You've kind of focused on teamwork. I mean, you've really kind of perfectly put across a key founder is collaboration. Can't do it all on your own. But if you're kind of going into these situations and you're practicing this, what's the best way to get buy-in with the team? You know, what's the way to kind of build that bridge or emphasize that?
I think it's a bit of the carrots and sticks. So I think the visibility again is such a key thing. So you can't, you know, that whole you can't improve what you can't measure. So making things visible and clear and obvious to everyone with some nice dashboards goes so far to get people understanding, I guess, and caring.
Ian, thank you so much again for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure as always. I've learned, which I think is something that is horrifically valuable. And, you know, in the short time that we've had, I've taken away so much that I didn't even think would come into that FinOps kind of area. And, you know, the impact of people within that has kind of massively come across. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
For all you wonderful people watching out there, feel free to contact us. We're on LinkedIn. We're across YouTube. We have our official website. Let us know if you want to see more content like this, other themes. If you've got any burning questions around FinOps, don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks again.